the land of your soul. Return to who you are. Return to what you are. Return to where you are. Born and reborn and reborn.
Shana Tova, everyone.
Shana Tova.
What a beautiful way to begin our service. Return again. Return to the land of your soul. And here we return to this parking lot sanctuary for a second year. Not what we had anticipated for these high holy days, but it is still nice to be together regardless, even if it looks a little different than we would have liked. I want to begin our service this morning with a reminder that we are not predestined to continue to be what we are. The science of how our brain works confirms this. One of the greatest scientific discoveries in recent years has been the demonstration of the plasticity of the human brain. One dramatic example of this is the case of Jill Taylor. Years ago, at age 37, she suffered from a stroke that destroyed the functioning of the left hemisphere of her brain. She couldn't walk or talk or read or write or even recall the details of her life. But she was very unusual in one respect. She herself was a neuroscientist. As a result, she was able to realize precisely what had happened to her. For 8 years, she worked every day together with her mother to exercise her brain. By the end, she recovered all of her faculties, using her right brain to develop the skills normally exercised by the left side of the brain. Brain scientists teach us that by an effort of will, we can change not just our behavior, not just our emotions, not even just our character, but the very structure and architecture of our brain. Rarely was there a more dramatic scientific vindication of the great Jewish insight that we can still change. It is also God's call to us on Rosh HaShanah to create new habits, to drop the bad ones, to live a better life if we can. And if we believe we can't, we won't. But if we believe we can, we may. So the great question this new year poses to us as we begin our Rosh Hashanah service this morning is, will we grow in knowledge and sensitivity and kindness? We must have courage to believe that we can be different, that we can be greater and more confident and more generous and more understanding and more forgiving than we were. May our service this morning, even though we're in a different format and a different location, inspire us to change for the better and to give us the courage to grow. In a moment, we're going to continue on page 110 with Ma Tovu. And hopefully you picked up, in the parking lot, picked up a gold machzor on your way in. We're on page 110 there. You who are watching at home, if you go to tbsohio.org, you can find the flip book of Mishkan Tefillah if you haven't found that. Also, just one more service note here. If you need to hear it on your radio, you can turn to channel 94.5 FM, and be able to hear it inside your car. Let's join together after all those announcements in singing Ma Tovu.
Yaakov Adonai Osi.
Continue on page 129, page 129. We'll read together at the bottom of the page. May it be your will, Adonai our God and God of our ancestors, that we discipline ourselves in Torah and devote ourselves to mitzvot. Help us to keep far from sin, to master temptation, to avoid falling under its spell. May our darker passions not rule us, nor evil companions lead us astray. Rather, strengthen in us the voice of conscience, prompt us to deeds of goodness, and bend our every impulse to your service. Today and every day, let us be gracious, loving, and compassionate in your eyes, and in the eyes of all humanity. Baruch atah Adonai gomel chasadim tovim la'amo Yisrael. Blessed are you, Adonai, who loves the people Israel, is revealed in the acts of goodness. Join together in Esa Ainai from Psalm 121, page 131. On page 139. Beloved friend who calls us to conscience, remind us of our own strength, invites us to grow, empowers us to act. Cosmic mysteries are yours, but the earth is ours to tend and heal as best we can. Beloved partner in creation, we join our strength with yours to make you real and true. We're going to turn to page 41, and if you're able to rise where you are, we'll ask you to please rise. If you're in your car, you can just sit up a little taller if you'd like. The Chatzi Kaddish, page 141. With us, yalla lai, yalla lai, 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 lai. Adonai, may be seated for a few moments. Let's read together on page 142. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, yotzer or uvarei hoshech, osei shalom uvarei et hakol, or olam be'otor hayim, orot mi ofnei amar vayechi. Source of blessing, our eternal God, your power fills the cosmos, shaping light, creating darkness, making peace and fashioning all things. Infinite light is preserved in life's treasure house. Lights from the darkness, said God, and it was so. Continue on page 148. V'ha'avienu l'shalom, bring us in peace from the four corners of the earth. Lead us with upright pride to the land that is ours. For you are a God of miracles and wonders. From all the peoples of the earth you sought us out and brought us near in your great enduring truth. So with love we acknowledge and proclaim that you are one. Baruch atah Adonai habocher ba'amo Yisrael ba'ahava. Our praise to you, Adonai, for you have singled out your people Israel with love. Continue with the Shema and invite, if you'd like to rise, you can certainly do that at this time.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Leolam Va'ed.
You may be seated.
V'ahavta et Adonai
Elohecha b'chol levavecha u'b'chol nafshecha
v'chol me'odecha
v'hayu hadvarim ha'ele asher anochi mitzavecha
hayom al levavecha
v'shinantam levanecha v'dibarta bam v'shivtecha b'veitecha uv'leftecha v'derek v'shakbecha uv'kumecha uv'shartam le'od al yadecha v'hayu latotafot b'einecha uchtavtam amizizot beitecha uvisharecha
למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי והייתם קדושים לאלוהיהם. אני
אדוני אלוהיכם אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות להם לאלוהים. Ani Adonai Eloheim. Emet. So many of us have relied on technology during these past 18 months. We have adjusted to Zoom meetings and Facebook Lives, and we have seen each other on FaceTime and Skype. We have learned together and studied together and shared life together, even when, for much of the 18 months, we were physically apart. There's been so much heartache in our lives right now, but also so much to celebrate. As we turn to the Michamocha prayer in a moment, our prayer of gratitude, I know that there is much for which you are grateful. Among those for me is my gratitude for the technology that can bring us together. So we're going to try and push the bounds of that technology a bit in a few moments on the screen in front of the Bima here and on your screens at home. If Nate can click it over on the OBS page. You'll see the Sharionim choir are going to be singing Michamocha. So you'll notice that we don't have any volunteers up here today. No one's doing readings. You're stuck with me for the shofar calls, and we have pre-recorded the Torah readings because we want to be really safe up here, and we're all in a bubble and all have been tested up here. So we're gonna do these readings and music, and we will still use our technology to bring joy and beauty and comfort during these times. So let's sing together. If this actually works, let's sing together with the Sharionim in Michamocha.
Michamocha, Levi Adonai, mi chamocha, neder b'kodesh, nora tehilot, osei felech, nora tehilot, osei felech. Yum bidi bum bum bye bye, yum bidi bum bum bye bye, yum bye bye, yum bye bye, yum bidi bum bum bye bye, yum bidi bum bum bye bye, yum bidi bum bum bye bye, yum bye bye, yum bye bye, yum bye 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 bye. Adonai yimloch be'olam va'ed, be'olam, be'olam, be'olam va'ed. Yum bidi bum bum bye bye, yum bidi bum bum bye bye, yum bye bye, yum bye bye, yum bidi bum bum bye bye, yum bidi bum bum bye bye, yum bidi bum bum bye bye, yum bye bye, yum bye bye, yum bye 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 bye, yum bye bye, yum bye bye, yum bye bye bye.
We invite you to turn to page. In a moment, we're going to turn to page 166. But first, I want to share this reading before the Amidah that's one of my favorites. It's called When You Thought I Wasn't Looking. When you thought I wasn't looking, I saw you hang my first painting on the refrigerator, and I immediately wanted to paint another one. When you thought I wasn't looking, I saw you feed a stray cat, and I learned that it was good to be kind to animals. When you thought I wasn't looking, I saw you make my favorite cake for me, and I learned that the little things can be special in life. When you thought I wasn't looking, I heard you say a prayer, and I knew there is a God that I could always talk to, and I learned to trust God. When you thought I wasn't looking, I saw you make a meal and take it to a sick friend, and I learned how important it is to care for others. When you thought I wasn't looking, I felt you kiss me goodnight, and I felt loved and safe. When you thought I wasn't looking, I saw tears come from your eyes, and I learned that it's okay sometimes to cry. When you thought I wasn't looking, I saw that you cared and wanted to be everything I could be. When you thought I wasn't looking, I learned most of life's lessons that I needed to know to be a good, kind, and productive person when I grow up. When you thought I wasn't looking, I looked at you and wanted to say thanks for all the things I saw when you thought I wasn't looking. In a few moments, we're going to recite the Amidah prayer that begins with a section that's called Our Parents. This section of the service says, thank you, God, for all the wonderful things that my parents did to help make me who I am today. This time of year, as we fondly remember Rosh Hashanah dinners and family gatherings, we acknowledge our parents and our ancestors and thank them for the beautiful gifts that they have given to us. I'll invite you, if you're able, to please rise. Page 166.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu ve'Elohei Avoteinu ve'Imoteinu Elohei Avraham Elohei Yitzhak Elohei Yaakov Elohei Leah Elohei
Rivka, Elohei Le'av, Elohei Rachel, Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor v'Hanara, El Elyon, Gomel Hasadim Tovim, V'konei HaKol, V'zocher Hastei Avot v'Imahot, U'mevi Geula Livnei v'Nehem, L'ma'an Shemo B'Ahava. Page 169. Remember us, Melech, crown of creation, lover of life. Remember us when you fill the cup of life. And for your sake, author of life, make us characters on your page, names that live for your sake between the covers of your book. Baruch atah Adonai Magen Avraham ve'ezrat Sarah.
Magen Avraham ve'ezrat Sarah.
You may be seated. We're going to continue in a moment with our haunting Unatana Tokef prayer with its theme of who shall live and who shall die. In years like this one, this prayer is particularly difficult for many of us. But at its core, it's a prayer that reminds us that none of us knows how much time we have on this earth. We can't control that. We probably felt that more than ever this past year. But God has given us the ability to determine our life's quality. We can make our life a thing of beauty and value. So as we read these words of Unatana Tokef this morning, may we make our days count. Let's join together in the choir again with Unatana Tokef. On page 174. Let us proclaim the power of this day, a day whose holiness awakens the deepest awe and inspires the highest praise for your dominion. For your throne is a throne of love, your reign is a reign of truth. Let's read together. In truth, you are judge and plaintiff, counselor and witness. You inscribe and seal. You record and recount. You remember all that we have forgotten. And when you open the book of memories, it speaks for itself. For every human hand leaves its mark, an imprint like no other. On page 176. And so the great shofar will cry, Tikiyah. A still small voice will be heard. Angels in a whirl of fear and trembling will say, "Behold the day of judgment, for they too are judged, and in your eyes even they are not blameless. All who come into this world pass before you like sheep before their shepherd. As a shepherd considers the flock when it passes beneath the staff. You count and consider every life. You set bounds. You decide destiny. You inscribe judgments."
Rosh HaShanah, Yikativor, Uvayom Som Kippur, Uvayom Som Kippur, Yechateimon, Rosh HaShanah.
Page 179, let's read together. Page 179. On Rosh Hashanah, we plunge like swimmers into the sea of words. On Yom Kippur, the sea rises, then crests, and we emerge sealed by wax, warmed by the fire of a braided candle. The new year is like a trailhead opening wide before us, the day of fasting narrow, breathless, so quick to close. We contemplate a new year, and this we know. Some of us will live, and some of us will die. Some will die young, and some very old. Some by fire, and some by water, some by sword, and some by beast. Some by hunger, and some by thirst. Some by plague, and some by earthquake. Some by stoning, and some by strangling. Some of us will feel at ease, and others will be restless. Some will have peace of mind, some will have strife. Some will be tranquil, and some tormented. Some will be raised high, and some will be brought low. Some will have riches, and some will be impoverished. Even so, the way we act, the way we speak, the way we meet God's image in ourselves and in others, these things have great power to make our lives matter. Therefore, let us make whole the broken shards, green the thick and withering grass. Let the wind fill us with urgency for life. Let dreams give birth to justice and goodness. God of holiness, God of hope, let us glimpse your truth as we attach our hope to yours. Continue with Lador Vador.
We are gifts and we are blessings. We are history in song.
We are hope and we are healing. We are learning to be strong. We are words and we are stories. We are pictures of the past. We are carriers of wisdom, not the first and not the last. We protect this chain from generation to generation. These lips will praise your name.
Looking back on the journey that we carry in our hearts.
From the shadow of the mountain to the waters that would part.
Salvador, we protect this chant from generation to generation. The Salvador, his lips will praise our
There was once a great storyteller who had a special talent for bringing a point through parables. When he saw that so many people came to a synagogue to listen to the shofar, yet neglected to do anything different during the year, he related the following parable. Years ago, when a fire broke out in the village, all the people would drop everything and band together to carry water from the well to put out the blaze. Once, when one of the villagers went to the big city, he suddenly heard bells and horns ringing. "What's the noise?" he asked. "Whenever there is a fire, we ring bells and blow horns to put out the fire," came the reply. When he returned to the village, he told the elders about his great discovery. From now on, they said, whenever there is a fire, we too will blow horns and ring bells, just like in the big city. We'll put out the fire. The next time there was a big fire, the town elders started blowing their horns and ringing their bells. And of course, the fire only got worse. Before long, half the village was gone. When the villager returned to the big city and asked the people, "How come we rang bells and the fire didn't go out?" they replied, "Do you really think that the bells and the horn put out the blaze? They only alert people that there is a fire. It's up to every one of us to extinguish it." It is the same, said the storyteller, with the sounding of the shofar. The sound of the shofar is an awakening call to alert us to try harder in the coming year to turn back to that version of ourselves to which we aspire. Now it's up to us to pray sincerely and to do the actual hard work of change. Only this will bring us closer to God. You may remember that we are going to sound the shofar in 3 sections throughout our service this morning. The first one focuses on sovereignty, on turning back to godliness. The second one will focus on remembering our past. And the final section will focus on hope for the future. May these 3 shofar sections wake us up and enable us to try a little harder, to be a little better, to make change in our lives. We continue on page 205. We're going to read these kavanot together. Ribono shel olam, power of all, have compassion on our souls and the souls of Israel. Open their hearts to do teshuvah before you. Open their souls for the sake of returning to you. Dwell on each sound of the shofar. Contemplate its meaning. Tikiyah, the one whole note. Shivarim teruah, 3 broken notes, 9 staccato notes. Tikiyah, one whole note. My return to the right path has the power to make me whole again. Tikiyah, once I was whole. Shivarim teruah, in the wear and tear of living I became broken and shattered. Tikiyah, my teshuvah, has the power to make me whole again. Blessed are the hearts that respond to the majestic music of the shofar. Blessed is the gift of life, the power of the renewal that brings to this day. I'll invite you to please rise.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddishanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lishmoa kol shofar.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Shecheyanu v'kiyamanu והגיענו לזמן הזה.
Amen. And I'm going to ask, maybe Mrs. Rose will lead us along with you in the congregation. Can you do the shofar calls? Usually we have someone up here to do this, but here we are. So so if you guys could say start off with Tikiyah on the bottom of page 206, the congregation will call the shofar. Ready? 1, 2, 3.
Tiki on.
Keep on going, everyone. Are you Shivarim Teruah?
Shivarim Teruah. Tikiyah. Tikiyah. Shivarim Teruah. Tikiyah. Teshuvah.
Wait, Teshuvah is not one of them.
Oh, sorry.
No, Teruah. Teruah.
Sorry. We didn't practice this. Sorry.
Teshuvah, just making amends for screwing up. So
Okay.
we make amends. All right.
I'm glad I said it. Okay.
Teruah. All right.
Thank you.
I was like, I don't know how to blow that one. And the last one is Tikiyah. Continue with Hayom Harat Olam on the next page. You may be seated.
Hayom Harat Olam. Hayom Yami B'mishpat. Kol Yatzorei Olamim. In Kavonim, in Kavodim. In Kavodim, Rachoreinu. Ve'Havim Avonim. V'Havim Kehavodim Aneinu L'chad Elot Ad Shetchaneinu V'Totzei Or Mishpateinu Hayom
On page 208. Eloheinu v'Elohei avotenu v'imotenu, kadshenu b'mitzvotecha, v'tein chalkenu b'toratecha, sabeinu mituvecha v'samchenu b'shuatecha, v'taher libenu lichvoda v'emet, ki ata Elohim emet, udvarcha emet v'kayam la'ad. God who is ours, and God of our fathers and our mothers, lead us to holiness through your mitzvot, and may each of us find a portion of Torah that is ours. You bestow such goodness, teach us to be satisfied, and to know the joy of your salvation. Help us to serve you truly with purity of heart, for you are a faithful God whose truth stands forever. Baruch atah Adonai, melech al kol haaretz mekadesh Yisrael, v'yom hazikaron. Our praise to you, eternal God, whose power pervades all the earth. You bring holiness to the people Israel, and on this day of remembrance. We're going to continue with singing Sim Shalom. That is our prayer for peace and wholeness You can find that on page 216.
Sim shalom.
Sim shalom.
Sim shalom.
Sim shalom tova uvrecha, chen v'chesed v'rachamim aleinu ve'al Yisrael.
Barchenu Yosreinu kulanu kehat me'ar panav kivior panachon tataranu Adonai Elohim. Sim shalom.
Sim shalom.
Sim
Sim
shalom.
shalom uvrecha, chen v'chesed v'rachamim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Sim shalom. Sim shalom.
Sim shalom.
Sim shalom uvrecha, chen v'chesed
Aleinu
ve'al kol
Yisrael
With that prayer swirling in the air around us for peace and wholeness, all of that which we are yearning for, especially as we welcome 5782. I'm going to ask you to please rise as we sing this iconic prayer and read this iconic prayer, Avinu Malkeinu. So if you're able to rise, I'll invite you to do so. We're on page 223, 223. Avinu Malkeinu, Shema Kolenu. Avinu Malkeinu, Almighty and Merciful, hear our voice. Avinu Malkeinu, Chatanu Lefanecha. Avinu Malkeinu, we have strayed and sinned before you. Avinu Malkeinu, Chamol Aleinu V'Alol Aleinu V'Tapenu. Avinu Malkeinu, have compassion on us and our families. Avinu Malkeinu, Kalei Dever V'Cherev V'Ra'av Me'aleinu. Avinu Malkeinu, halt the onslaught of sickness, violence, and hunger. Avinu Malkeinu, Kalei Kol Tzara Mastin Me'aleinu. Avinu Malkeinu, halt the reign of those who cause pain and terror. Avinu Malkeinu, Kodvenu B'Sefer Chayim Tovim. Avinu Malkeinu, enter our names in the book of lives well lived. Avinu Malkeinu, Chadesh Aleinu Shana Tova. Avinu Malkeinu, renew for us a year of goodness. Avinu Malkeinu, chonenu vanenu ki ein banu ma'asim. Aseh imanu tzedakah v'chesed v'hoshienu. Avinu Malkeinu, almighty and merciful, answer us with grace, for our deeds are wanting. Save us through acts of justice and love.
Avinu Malkeinu, chonenu v'honeinu. Avinu Malkeinu, chonenu v'honeinu, ki ein banu ma'asim. Aseh imanu, aseh imanu, aseh imanu, tzedakah v'chesed v'hoshienu.
May be seated. Well, Shana Tova, everyone. I'd like to begin this morning's talk by taking you on a trip back to the 1990s. 1993 to be exact. It was a simpler time before smartphones existed, before social media. The internet itself was only just getting started. The story takes place out west in Billings, Montana in December of 1993. It was one of the early nights of Hanukkah, and the Schnitzer family celebrated this by displaying menorahs in the windows of their home. During this joyous season, they were excited to display their menorahs, eager to teach their kids about taking pride in Judaism. But one night, the family was startled to hear the crash of broken glass. They investigated and found that a brick had been thrown through the window of their 6-year-old son's bedroom. While that act was horrible and disturbing, what happened afterward was far more memorable. So this wasn't the first act of hate that Billings had seen in that year. In recent months, both a black church and a Native American family had been the targets of intimidation and hate speech. So the people of Billings showed remarkable unity and decided that they had enough with this hate, bigotry, and anti-Semitism. Religious and community leaders, labor union volunteers, law enforcement, and the local newspaper concerned residents together, all united in action, and spoke loudly against the hate and intolerance, proclaiming in no uncertain terms, "Not in our town." The following day, this following text appeared in the newspaper. It said, "On December 2nd, 1993, someone twisted by hate threw a brick through the window of a home of one of our neighbors, a Jewish family who chose to celebrate the holiday season by displaying a symbol of faith, a menorah for all to see. Today, members of religious faiths throughout Billings are joining together to ask residents to display the menorah as a symbol of something else, our determination to live together in harmony, and our dedication to the principle of religious liberty, embodied in the First Amendment of the Constitution of the United States of America. We urge all citizens to share in this message by displaying the menorah on a door or window from now through Christmas," said the article. "Let all the world know that this hatred of a few cannot destroy what all of us in Billings and in America have worked so long to build." The Billings Gazette then published a full-page color menorah in their newspaper. By the end of the week, More than 10,000 homes in this small town were decorated with menorahs in the windows. They said, "Not in our town. We will stand together and support one another. We will create light among this horrible darkness." The story is touching on a number of levels. People stood up for one another. They didn't back down to hatred and anti-Semitism. The community united and said, "We are here for each other. We care about one another." And they were able to work together to rid their town of these hate groups. Perhaps what worked almost 30 years ago is still instructive to us today. As I deliver these words in September of 2021, many of us in the Jewish community have had our guard up for some time now, as the uptick in anti-Semitism that we've seen in these past years feels very tangible to us. In the weeks following this past summer's fighting between Israel and Gaza, the ADL tracked that anti-Semitism in the summer alone went up 75%. And unfortunately, anti-Semitic speech is one of only a few bipartisan endeavors left in this country at the moment, coming from both the left and the right. It also just seems like we are living in a time when baseless hatred and tribalism are at an all-time high. We don't talk to people with views different from our own. We don't pursue friendships with people from different walks of life. We stick with our tribe and demonize others, and that can only lead us to a dark place. Rabbi Angela Bookdahl reminds us that our tradition, Rosh HaShanah, Yom, is also called Yom Teruah, the day of the sounding of the shofar. That Hebrew word from Teruah comes from the word hitriah, which means to warn. A traditional role of the shofar is to wake us up, to call us to account, to remind us of our responsibility to repair the world, and to warn us of impending danger. And that shofar's purpose seems as clear today as ever in our history. For Alex Zeldin, it began as a normal Friday. He was headed to Trader Joe's on the upper west side of New York City to pick up some food for Shabbat. As usual, he was wearing his yarmulke, his kippah. When he turned a corner, he realized that a couple of teenagers started to follow him, spewing anti-Semitic insults. "It took me about halfway down the block," he said, "to realize that the thing that they were commenting on was yarmulke." Over and over again, they kept saying, "I want to take that yarmulke. I want to hit him in the head and take that yarmulke from that Jewish baby killer," Zeldin recalled. Zeldin's harassers ultimately peeled off, but the fact that they used the term baby killer gave him a jolt. Calling Jews baby killers, that's blood libel, he writes. That's the thing that was happening in medieval Europe, referring to the age-old anti-Semitic lie that accused Jews of murdering Christian children and using their blood in rituals. What a scary incident. We in the Jewish community sadly have seen these stories and violence against Jews and others multiply as of recent times, and our hearts sink. We are forever living with the mental stress of Charlottesville, of Pittsburgh and Poway, as well as the various stories of smaller acts of violence that we have read and felt from around our country. We have seen the ratcheting up of anti-Semitic incidents on college campuses with people claiming to be anti-Israel, but instead their rhetoric is blatantly anti-Semitic. But there's also a type of anti-Semitism that is very common, that I would imagine almost all of us gathered here today and watching online have experienced at least once. Someone says something in person or online echoing an anti-Semitic trope. You know, something like, "Here's a coupon because I know your people like a good deal." A rabbi named Mara Nathan writes about her experience talking to a parent of one of her daughter's classmates. She told this parent that her family had immigrated to the U.S. from Russia to escape anti-Semitic persecution. "Persecution," the woman said. "Everyone knows that the Jews have all the power. You control the banks and the media, right?" Even the rabbi stood there in stunned silence, not knowing how to respond. I hear a few times a year from families in our congregation whose kids have faced some sort of anti-Semitism, whether it was a swastika painted on a bathroom wall, or a number of anti-Semitic jokes that were told on a bus, or teammates sending a Heil Hitler video to a Jewish student via text. And while these types of situations seem to have increased, they have been around for a long time. So the big question is, what can we do, and how can we respond? How can we combat this hate and anti-Semitism? Dr. Deborah Lipstadt, who was recently appointed to be the United States Ambassador for Monitoring and Combating Anti-Semitism, in her most recent book writes, she reminds us that anti-Semitism comes from both sides of the aisle. She says, it's hard, if not impossible, to explain that something that is essentially irrational or delusional or absurd. The nature of all conspiracy theories, she writes, of which anti-Semitism is just one, is that anti-Semitism has not remained impervious to erasure. It morphed and evolved throughout history into what she calls a toxic brew of race, religion, politics, and pseudoscience. Today, we continue to see these ideas expressed on the left and the right. It doesn't matter who is spewing hate speech, she writes, because the consequences are equally dangerous following speech from both sides of the aisle. So as we begin this new year 5782, when we want to start with a clean start, a clean slate, I would like to offer 3 different tools that we can use to help stem the tide of these anti-Semitic events. First, we must speak up. As a rabbi named Daniel Grapper writes, in 1963 at the March on Washington, Rabbi Joachim Prince came to the podium between the gospel singer Mahalia Jackson and Martin Luther King Jr. He was rescued by Stephen Weiss in 1937 and brought to America, where he gained acclaim for his activism. Rabbi Prince said, "When I was the rabbi of a Jewish community in Berlin under the Hitler regime, I learned many things. The most important thing that I learned was under these tragic circumstances was that bigotry and hate are not the most urgent problem. The most urgent problem, the most disgraceful and the most shameful and the most tragic problem is silence." Identifying and calling out hate speech and hateful acts where we see them can be really tough. Let's put that on the table. It puts us in an awkward position. So often we are the witness or victim of an anti-Semitic comment, and we don't know what to do in that moment, partly because we're stunned or we're hurt. Sometimes we can't even believe what we just heard. But if we do not say anything and let the comment pass, we become complicit in its proliferation. Now, this isn't to say that every comment and action deserves an immediate response. Sometimes it's effective to let people know how offensive their comment is. Other times, waiting until a little bit later makes sense. Last year, one of our college students reached out to me because she felt that one of her professor's comments about Israel bordered on anti-Semitism, and she wanted some tools to respond. We talked together to the director of her Hillel on campus and got some tips, and at the end of the semester, she was able to have a meaningful conversation with the professor. Did this change his outlook? Maybe not. But she let him know that his comments made her uncomfortable, and that is a start. If we're not in a position where we feel like we can speak up in the moment, we can at least report an act of anti-Semitism to authorities. If someone says something at work, reach out to a supervisor. Document every incident. Report it to law enforcement. If you're in school or your child is in school and someone says something, find a trusted adult and tell them exactly what happened. A number of teachers in the districts around the temple have reached out to us over the years asking for resources on fighting anti-Semitism, and that's almost always the result of somebody reporting an offense. On Yom Kippur, we will be hearing again from James Pash, who is the regional director of the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League. They have an online form that you can fill out and report any incidents of anti-Semitism. This helps them know where to focus education, where there are hotspots for hate, and where their programs can have the biggest impact. Another place where many of us have seen comments that are at least borderline anti-Semitic is online. We see it in Facebook posts and blogs and on TikTok and on Instagram. We make the horrible mistake maybe of reading comments under a post about Israel or a political figure. How do you respond to these types of comments? In most cases, I would argue that you shouldn't. I know that it's tempting to want to get into a Facebook fight with a stranger, but those arguments are almost never productive. And the more attention we give to a post, the more traction it gets. And I don't know too many people who go on Facebook to have their minds changed. So if you know of someone in real life who has posted something offensive, yes, please, certainly I think it's appropriate to reach out and call them out. But as many of us have learned over the years, arguing with an internet troll who is looking only to rile us up, whom we may never meet in person, doesn't usually end well. So what can you do? You can report that post and flag it as hate speech. Even though a lot of social media companies were really slow to combat anti-Semitism, they do now have tools in place to be able to fight it and to pull those posts down. Another way we can help stem the tide of anti-Semitism is through education and connection. Rabbi Angela Bookdahl tells a story about Derek Black, the godson of David Duke. Following in his godfather's footsteps, Derek started his own white supremacist radio show, and he was a rising star, the heir apparent of the white nationalist movement. But when he went to a small liberal arts college in Florida and saw that his views were unaccepted, he tried to go undercover. When his identity was discovered online, he was completely ostracized at school. Nobody would speak to him. There was, however, one Orthodox Jew who invited him to his Shabbat table every week. Little by little, Black changed his mind, and not only renounced his anti-Semitic views, but also his racism and his hatred of the LGBTQ community. When he first wrote about his transformation online, his father had thought that his email had been hacked. And when he realized that it was genuine, his father renounced him publicly, as did David Duke. That connection, that one relationship, made all the difference. We as a society are at our best when we look out for each other, when we educate one another, when we learn about each other's culture. We cannot make anti-Semitism only a Jewish issue. The Jewish community has stood up for oppressed people around the world. We have fought for civil rights. We have stood by our Muslim brothers and sisters when they encountered hate. And when we want others to stand with us, we must continue with standing with those who are marginalized. So many of us have a visceral response when we think about that unthinkable, horrible violence that happened at the Tree of Life Synagogue. I'll never forget the images from that day and the pain that reverberated around the world. But I will also never forget the beauty and the humanity of people coming together to say, hate will not win. In the days following that Tree of Life massacre, many of us were gathered inside our sanctuary as our congregation was joined by Christian friends and Muslim friends and people from throughout our community who stood together. It was such an important reminder that there is so much more goodness and compassion out there than there is hate and fear. It's just that sometimes the hate is so much louder. Those relationships start with education. We can educate through our relationships with our non-Jewish friends and our neighbors. Now, to be clear, I'm not saying that we should go out and try to proselytize our neighbors and encourage them to convert to Judaism. That has never been part of our tradition. But we should teach others about the beauty of our religion, just like we want to learn about their religions. Rabbi Jonathan Sachs writes that non-Jews respect Jews who respect Judaism, and they are embarrassed by Jews who are embarrassed by Judaism. Maybe we can invite our neighbors into our sukkah, or for latkes on Hanukkah, or to join us around our Seder tables learning about the Exodus, or even for a Shabbat dinner. The more we teach and learn, the more we stand together, the stronger we are, and that's when we will be there for each other. Finally, along with speaking out and educating with compassion, another way that we can combat hate and anti-Semitism is to turn inward, look at our souls, and lean into Judaism. One of the tropes of this High Holy Day season is return. We sing Hashivenu Adonai Elecha V'Nashuva Hadesh Amenu Kekedem. Return, return again to the land of your soul. What if we could actually return this year, not just to that best version of ourselves, but to really live our lives with Jewish values at their center? Even an incremental change can make a big difference. Maybe this year you can add a Jewish book to your bedside table. Sarah Horowitz's introduction to Judaism, called Here Along, is particularly charming. Or maybe you can listen to some Jewish music or watch Shtisel on Netflix. Lauren and I binged that one. Maybe you can learn how to make matzo ball soup or perfect a challah recipe. Maybe you're interested in doing some adult education. We have a bunch of different classes that we offer throughout the year, including Hebrew for adults. Or maybe you'll find a connection through prayer, and join us and others here at TBS and online for services, which give us that sanctuary we need, even if we're not in the actual sanctuary after a tough week. Maybe you'd rather act on your Jewish values and volunteer, as some of you already do, with the New Albany Food Pantry or the Mid-Ohio Food Bank or Meals on Wheels or here at Temple. Wherever and whatever change you make, however you return, you will certainly be better and your Judaism will be stronger for it. One final story for you. One of my friends and colleagues, Rabbi Brian Stoller, who is the spiritual leader of Temple Israel in Omaha, Nebraska, recently shared a story that happened in his congregation over this past summer. Brian writes, back in April, our executive director, Nate Shapiro, discovered an anti-Semitic sticker on a light pole at the temple. Our security cameras captured the man in action. He was quickly identified as Jonathan Ziegler, a member of a white pride group here in Omaha. Rabbi Stoller writes, I venture to guess that had we been in Nate's shoes, we could have pressed charges against Mr. Ziegler, or at least done some kind of penalty for him. I probably would have done that anyway, to be honest, writes the rabbi. But Nate, the executive director, responded differently than I might have, showing a tremendous amount of compassion and courage. He said he didn't want to press charges as long as Jonathan would sit down and talk with him, to try to understand why he did what he did, and to give him the opportunity to meet a real-life Jew and ask whatever he wanted to ask. And so what happened? They did. They actually sat down. Nate, the executive director of the temple, and Jonathan, the fledgling white power activist, got together over a beer and talked. And then they did it again and again and again throughout this past summer. And in the process, they built a friendship. And Jonathan's heart softened when he came to know his new Jewish friend. And in early August, just a month before the High Holy Days, Jonathan recorded a video, a remarkable video, in which he apologized publicly to the congregation for what he had done. He owned his actions. They showed the video in their sanctuary this summer and broadcasted it online as well. And the board of the temple had an emergency session where they met and voted unanimously to accept Jonathan's apology. Sadly, there have been so many anti-Semitic incidents like this around the country in the last few years. But how many times has the vandal sought to make amends? And how many times has the congregation targeted received an apology from the perpetrator's own mouth just months later? Probably not often, maybe never. This is a unique and inspiring story. There is so much power in relationship. Though it is out of style these days, conversations like this one are our very best way of combating anti-Semitism. When we get to know one another, when we share our lives with each other, we become human again. And in some rare cases, perhaps, we can even become friends. This is Rosh HaShanah, the dawn of a new year, 5782. So we ask ourselves, will we live in fear or will we live in hope? Will we let anti-Semitism fester, or will we bravely address it in our lives? Will we isolate ourselves, or will we reach out and build a diverse community of people who care about one another, who stand up for each other? Will we make apologies for our own religion, or will we lovingly embrace Judaism and Jewish values? There is so much in our world that is out of our control right now. We feel that in these moments, maybe more than ever. But we can reclaim our own narrative. We can write our own story. We can fight hate with compassion, with connection, with education, and with love. Hayom Harat Olam, the beautiful song that we just heard sung. Today the world is born anew, and we have the limitless capacity for renewal. May we seize this moment, may we dispel the darkness, and may we together strive toward light in this new year. I say to that, Amen. We're going to continue our service with the singing of Ein Kamocha, and I'm going to reiterate that our Torah service will look much different than it normally looks inside of our sanctuary. We have our Torah readings are going to happen on the screen up there, but at least we can get a flavor for the sense of Torah. And there is a mitzvah, by the way, in actually hearing the Torah read. So we can still fulfill that mitzvah, even though we're watching Torah be read and chanted on a screen. We'll join together in singing Ein Kamocha on page 227.
Ein kamocha ve'Elohim Adonai, ve'ein k'ma'asecha, malchutecha malchu ka'olamim, u'memshatecha b'chador v'hador. Adonai melech, Adonai malach, Adonai yimlach, le'olam va'ed. Adonai os le'amo yitain, Adonai yevarech et amo v'shalom.
We're going to do communal aliyot as has been our custom at Temple Beth Shalom for a number of years. So if you would like to participate in any one of these three aliyot, we'll ask you to stand at that moment and deliver it right from where you're standing. The Torah blessings can be found on page 230. And for the first aliyah, I want to ask anyone who recovered from an illness this past year, if you had, God forbid, if you had COVID and thank God recovered, or if you've had any illness in this past year and you recovered, I'll ask you to please rise. And you who are online, you can even rise at home and do this together. And we'll do the blessing together. 1, 2, 3. Baruch hu et Adonai hamvorach. Baruch Adonai hamvorach le'olam va'ed. Baruch Adonai hamvorach le'olam va'ed. Baruch ata Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim, v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch ata Adonai noten ha'torah. Amen. I see our first Torah reader sitting in the congregation and has the pleasure of watching herself over here. Let's join together and as we hear this Torah reading. The Torah is on page 240.
Ve'ha'alehu sham le'ola lechar heharim asher amar elecha ve'yashkem Abraham baboker ve'yachavo shel chamro ve'yikach et shnei ne'arav ito ve'et Yitzchak beno yevaka atzeola V'yakam yalech el hamakom asher amar lo ha'elohim vayom b'ashlish Abraham את עיניו, וירא את המקום מרחוק. ויאמר אברהם אל נעריו, שבו לכם פה, עם החמור ואני והנער, נלכה עד כה ונשתחוו ונשובה עליכם.
Beautiful Yasher Koach to you, Leah. And we're going to go to the bottom of the page in 230. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chaye olam nata betochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah. Amen. For the second Aliyah, anybody who has celebrated a big birthday or anniversary this year, I'll let you judge what makes it a big birthday or anniversary. But if you'd like to join together with us for the Aliyah too, I'll invite you to please rise. You can do that at home as well. Baruch et Adonai Hamvorach. Baruch Adonai Hamvorach le'olam va'ed. Baruch Adonai Hamvorach le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah. Amen.
Amar lo Elohim, vayiven sham Avraham et hamizbeach, baruch et ha'etzim, vayakod et Yitzchak beno, vayasem oto al hamizbeach, mimal ha'etzim. Vayishlach Avraham et yado, vayikach et hamachelet, lishchot et beno. ויקרא אליו מלאך אדוני מן השמיים, ויאמר אברהם אברהם, ויאמר הנני, ויאמר אל תשלח ידך אל הנער, ואל תעש לו מאומה, כי אתה ידעתי, כי ירא אלוהים אתה. לא חסכת את בנך את יחידך ממני. ויישא אברהם את עיניו, וירא והנה העיל אחר, נאחז בסבך בקרניו. וילך אברהם ויקח את העיל, ויעלהו לעולה תחת בנו. ויקרא אברהם שם המקום ההוא אדוני יראה, אשר יאמר היום בהר אדוני יראה.
So the blessing after. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chaye olam nata betochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah. Amen. Yasher koach to you, Connie. And now to our third aliyah. Anyone who engaged in any sort of volunteer work this year, if you did something to help somebody else, and if you'd like, you can rise, and we'll do this blessing together. Baruch et Adonai Hamvorach. Baruch Adonai Hamvorach le'olam va'ed. Baruch Adonai Hamvorach le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah. Amen.
ויקרא מלאך אדוני אל אברהם שנית מן השמיים, ויאמר בנשבעתי נאום אדוני כי יען אשר עשית את הדבר הזה, ולא חסכת את בנך, את יחידך, כי ברך אברכך, והרבה הרבה את זרעך ככוכבי השמיים, וככל אשר על שפת הים, וירש זרעך את שער אויביו, והתברכו בזרעך כל גויי הארץ, עקב אשר שמעת בקולי. וישב אברהם אל נעריו, ויקומו וילכו יחדיו אל באר שבע, וישב אברהם בבאר שבע.
Let's join together in the blessing after. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torat emet, v'chayei olam nata betochenu. Baruch atah Adonai, noten haTorah. Amen. Yasher koach, Joel. I think I saw you chanting along with yourself over there. Beautifully done twice. That was really, really nice. We're going to turn back in our machzor. We're nearing the end of our service. We're going to turn to page 267 for our next two sections of shofar. Page 267. Eloheinu v'Elohei avotenu v'imotenu, God of remembrance. Remember the covenant of our ancestors. We affirm it today. Remember, we are a people of noble ideals. Help us attain them. Remember all your people, all the nations on the road to peace. Bless their efforts. Remember with mercy the binding of Isaac, the sorrow of Sarah, Abraham's words, "Here I am." Our memory fades, but you remember all that we have forgotten. Your presence is a throne where all things matter and nothing is lost. Baruch atah Adonai, Zocher habrit. Blessed are you, Adonai. You remember your covenant. You remember us. I'll ask everyone to please rise.
Got it.
All right. Mrs. Rose and everyone else who would like to chant the calls, whenever you are ready.
Tekiah, Shivarim Teruah, Tekiah, Tekiah, Shivarim, Tekiah, Tekiah, Teruah, Tekiah.
Continue with Hayom Harat Olam.
D minor. Hayom Harat Olam, Hayom Harat Olam, Yalla la 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 la, Yalla yalla la, Yalla la 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 la, Yalla la la la, Yalla yalla la, Hayom Harat Olam, Hayom Harat Olam.
We're going to one more time turn to our screen. You may be seated. Turn one more time to our screen as we have the precious words, return again, Hashivenu Adonai Elecha V'Nashuva, Chadesh Yameinu Kekedem, we ask you, O God, to help us renew our days. We return once more to the calling of the shofar, our third shofar sounding. And this is the last section called Shofarot. And the reminder here is that the shofar, while it does call us to change, it is also our beacon for hope. It's the idea that when we hear the voice of the shofar, we know that we can do better. We know that we can change and that the future is in front of us. So in that way, we'll ask everyone once again to please rise. On page 284 at the top of the page, we'll do this blessing together. Baruch atah Adonai, shomea kol teruat amo Yisrael barachamim. Blessed are you in our lives, Adonai. You hear with love the shofar, the true voice of your people Israel. And I'm going to apologize for the Tikiyah Gedola. I'm not a professional. Okay, here we go for the first ones. And you can call them out, page 284. Ready? 1, 2, 3.
Tekiah. Shivarim Teruah. Tekiah. Tekiah. Shivarim. Tekiah. Tekiah. Teruah. Tekiah Gedolah.
All right.
Yasher Koach.
Still standing, all right. Let's sing Hayom Harat Olam. Thank you, God, that the world is born anew, as are we. You may be seated.
Hayom Harat Olam. Hayom Harat Olam. Ya la 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 la. Ya la ya la la. Ya la 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 la. Ya la ya la la. Hayom Harat Olam. Hayom Harat Olam.
we'll ask you if you're able to please rise for Aleinu, one of our concluding prayers.
Aleinu l'shabeach l'adon hakol, l'teit gedula liotzer b'reishit, shelo asanu k'riyeh ha'aratzot, velo samanu k'mishpachot ha'adama, shelo sam chelkeinu ka'am, v'gora aleinu k'chol hamonam, v'anachnu korim, ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא.
We continue with our Kaddish prayer. On this Rosh Hashanah, when so many of us are perhaps thinking of people who we shared Rosh Hashanah's past with, sitting around, maybe you're remembering somebody's apple cake, or sharing a holiday meal, or sitting next to somebody in the sanctuary. Beautiful aspect of our tradition, and that it invites us to bring our loved ones with us on this day. On this Rosh Hashanah, on this Holy New Year, we are thinking of our loved ones for whom we are in Shloshim, remembering Ruth Hartzman, Lillian Melching, and Mark Feinkenoff. We remember those who died at this season in years past, and we take them into our hearts with our own. We're thinking of Ira Howard Abramovitz, Mabel Abramovitz, Meyer Abramson, Jacob Borovitz. We're thinking of Bernard Ehrenberg, William Feicht, Fern Flegel, Ida Katz, Rosalind Levy, Archie Rafal, Ida Rich, Lynn Reiches, Dorothy Shear, Pearl Schultz, Barbara Schifrin, and Ruth Tannenbaum. If there are other names, folks who you're remembering, I invite you to call them out from the congregation or write them in our comments on Facebook. On their behalf and on behalf of all of those who have no one to say Kaddish for them, we turn to page 292. Hi, Rabbi. And join together. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah. Be'alma divrach hirutei v'yamlich malchutei. V'chayechon uv'yamechon uv'chayei dechol beit Yisrael. Ba'gala uv'yizman kari v'yimru amen. Yehi shmei Rabbah mevarach le'olam u'lamei almaya. Yiparach v'yishtabach v'yipa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh. V'yithadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei dekudasham barichu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata. Tushbachata v'nechamata. Damiran be'alma v'imru, amen. Yehi shlama Rabba min Shemaya, v'chayim alenu ve'al kol Yisrael, v'imru, amen. Osei shalom b'imramav, hu ya'aseh shalom, alenu ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol yoshvei tevel, v'imru, amen. May all those who are seeking comfort and peace find it, and may this year bring renewed wholeness among all those who are mourning. And together we say, Amen. You may be seated. Just a couple of brief announcements before a closing story and a closing song. We have lunch available. We have boxed lunches available that you're going to get on your way out of the parking lot. They are from Scotty's. So that's always tasty. A special thanks to Alan and Bobby Weiler for sponsoring that. So if you enjoy the lunch, send them a note or give them a phone call and say thanks for that. You can pick that up on your way. I think I see the box. I think people standing over there with boxes that you'll get on your way out. And at 11:30, the Shir Shirim service, the musical service, begins. Not that this wasn't musical, but another musical service begins at 11:30. And then Tashlich over here is at 1:30 p.m. Out in the creek. All of that, with the exception of Tashlich, everything will be streamed online as well. As we finish this service today, I'd like to share a sweet story that many of you may have seen happen at this summer's Olympic Games. In a track and field moment seen around the world, Qatar's Mutas Essa Barshim and the Italian Gianmarco Tamberi were seen talking to an official after the high jumpers both made a very close jump. Both jumpers had just finished an event, and it became clear that they had exactly the same score. According to the Olympic rules, the gentleman could have elected for a jump-off to determine who got the gold medal. A jump-off would have truly cemented who is the very best and who would have really deserved the gold medal the best. But instead, in a video captured of that moment, Barshim can be heard asking officials if the two jumpers could both have gold medals. After all, they had tied for the best time in the competition. When the officials gathered together and then agreed, and Tamberi realizes what has happened, there is a super charming moment that you can watch online when he leaps into Barshim's arms. The two have said that while they are fierce competitors, they have actually become friends over the years, and they both took home gold medals. Both were coming back from a particularly from an almost career-ending injury, so the gold meant a lot to both of them. Both jumpers truly embodied the spirit of the Olympic Games. During a time when the news that we see every day is filled with such darkness, this moment of light can remind us how to be that best version of ourselves. If we can let go of a little bit of our pride and embrace each other, we will be able to start this new year from a better place. May this new year, 5782, bring with it love and tolerance and peace and health. And may we work to return to that best version of ourselves. We join together in our closing song, Adon Olam, page 298.
Adon Olam, Hashem Allah, B'terem kol Yitzirah, Ve'enasa, Lechefsa kol, Azai Melech, Shemo Nikra.
Asher malach b'terem kol yitzir livon ve'ein nasav ve'efsem kol azai melech shemo nikra ve'acharei kiklot hakol levado yimloch nara ve'hu haya ve'hu omer hu yeh v'tifara Adon olam asher malach b'terem kol yitzir livon ve'ein nasav ve'efsem kol azai melech shemo nikra ve'acharei kiklot hakol levado yimloch nara ve'hu haya ve'hu omer
Verse 3.
ויהי נצח, אפשר כל הזן מלך שלא נגע, ויחרי עוד הכל, ולא ימלוך הרע, והוא היה, והוא עובר, בתפארה, והוא היה, והוא עובר, בתפארה, והוא היה, והוא עובר, בתפארה, והוא היה, והוא עובר, בתפארה.
Osei shalom b'mramav hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'al kol yoshvei tevel v'imru amen.
Amen.
May you find peace and wholeness and togetherness in this world and this year, and may 5782 be one of sweetness and health. And together we say, Shana Tova! Oh yeah, that was unclear. Amen and Shana Tova! Happy New Year, everyone.
Now it's truly over. All right.
So, as we say in the Jewish word, Yasher.
I need a copy of that map.